My sister-in-law speaks confidently, saying that my husband's $80 million estate, as well as our house, will all go to her since they don't have any children. My name is Emma, and I'm a 45-year-old part-time worker. My husband and I have two sons, one in his senior year and the other a sophomore in high school. Our oldest son is preparing for college entrance exams this year. He dreams of becoming a lawyer and has been studying hard for it. He's wanted to be a lawyer ever since he was little, likely inspired by my older brother, Oliver, who is also a lawyer. A few years ago, my brother established his own law firm and even hired a few lawyers. Watching him, my eldest son developed a love for studying and always got good grades, even back in elementary school. When my brother heard that my son wanted to be a lawyer, he was thrilled and encouraged him. My son always tells my brother when they meet, "I will be a lawyer like you, Uncle." My brother laughs and replies, "Hurry up and become a lawyer and follow in my footsteps." My brother is married, but he doesn't have any children. When he visits us, he happily plays with my sons and spoils them. His wife is 10 years younger than him. She's not very friendly and doesn't visit our house often, so we don't talk much. My brother and I lost our parents when we were young, so when I got married, my brother stepped in as a parental figure. After I got married, he decided to get married too. My husband and I were relieved to know he was planning to marry a younger woman, but when we met her, I was surprised at how unhappy she looked. We expected her to be happy since she was about to marry my brother, but she had a sulky expression. I told them, "You two look great together." But when I was alone with my husband later, I shared my true feelings, wondering why she seemed so unhappy. My husband agreed with me, saying she wasn't a particularly pleasant bride, but there wasn't much we could do about it. My brother married his fiancée shortly before they got married, and he bought a house. My husband and I took our children to visit them and celebrate the occasion. When we visited my brother's house, it was magnificent, just as I expected since he owns a law firm. However, we didn't see my sister-in-law. My husband jokingly asked my brother, "Has your wife already left you?" Although my husband was clearly joking, my brother's serious expression made us both uneasy. My brother explained that whenever there's an issue, his wife goes back to her parents' house. Today was her mother's birthday, so she was staying there to celebrate. My husband felt bad for making such a joke. Then, out of the blue, my brother asked with a serious face, "If I ever can't have children, can I adopt one of yours?" At first, I thought he was joking, but he seemed sincere. I was too surprised to respond, but my husband laughed and said, "We don't know what the future holds, so let's discuss it if it ever happens. If you're okay with it, you can adopt whichever one you want." My husband didn't take it seriously, but I was concerned, both about the adoption idea and about the fact that my brother and his wife weren't getting along. It wasn't my place to interfere, but I was worried. After that, whenever we visited my brother or he visited us, it was always just him. His wife never came along. My brother also never mentioned her, so I avoided asking about her. They had been married for over 10 years, and by now, I had almost forgotten she existed. This year, my eldest son got accepted into his dream law school. When my brother came over to celebrate, he brought up the idea of adoption again. He said, "Like I mentioned before, would you allow me to adopt one of your kids?" My brother and his wife were unable to have children, so he was serious about it this time. My husband, still not taking it too seriously, quickly replied, "Would you prefer to have our eldest son since he wants to be a lawyer?" He said it so casually, but I was cautious because this was a major life-changing decision for our sons. Even though they would be with their uncle, I was still worried, especially about how my sister-in-law would treat them. I was worried that my sister-in-law might not treat my son well if he wasn't her biological child. So I asked my brother, "Is your wife okay with adopting?" He smiled a bit uncomfortably and said, "Don't worry about her, we've already talked about it." Hearing that they had discussed it made me feel better, but I still needed time to decide. I wanted to talk it over with my two sons since they're old enough to make their own decisions. We didn't go any further with the discussion that day. A few days later, I got a call from my brother's law firm saying he had collapsed. I rushed to the hospital and found the staff from his firm waiting with worried looks. My brother had a stroke at work and was unconscious. After I arrived, the staff left, but they mentioned they couldn't reach my sister-in-law. I tried calling their home, but no one answered, and I didn't have her cell phone number. My husband and our younger son later arrived at the hospital, but we still couldn't reach my sister-in-law. Eventually, my son found my brother's smartphone among his belongings. We unlocked it and searched for her number. When I called, she answered angrily, "I told you not to call again, or I'll sue you." I started to speak calmly. "It's Emma, Oliver's sister." My brother passed out and was taken to the hospital. As soon as she realized it was me, her tone changed, and she started speaking gently. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought it was Oliver. You said he collapsed?" I explained his condition and told her which hospital he was in, but she responded cheerfully, "I can't go to the hospital right now because I have things to do, but please let me know if there's any news," and then hung up. I was shocked that she had more important things to do while her husband was so sick. Realizing that my sister-in-law wouldn't be of any help, we decided to take care of my brother ourselves. My eldest son had finished his college entrance exams and was home most of the time, so he visited my brother every day for me. Unfortunately, my brother never regained consciousness and remained in critical condition. Despite this, my sister-in-law never called or visited the hospital. About a week after my brother was hospitalized, I called her again. She quickly answered, sounding almost happy. "What's up? Did he die?" I wanted to yell at her for being so rude, but I stayed calm and said, "He's still alive. Why didn't you visit the hospital?" She replied irritably, "I'm not a doctor or a miracle worker. There's nothing I can do to help him get better." I got even angrier after hearing how my sister-in-law spoke, so I hung up the phone. I started to wonder if my brother wanted to adopt one of my sons because he had given up on having children with his wife. I also thought that maybe their marriage wasn't going well. When my brother got married, I had asked him how they met, and he said it was through a marriage counseling agency. It made me think that maybe my sister-in-law married him just because he was a lawyer and she wanted a good life. This thought made me even angrier. When I talked to my husband about it, he said something even harsher. He mentioned that if my brother died in this situation, his wife would inherit everything since they didn't have any children. My husband suggested that maybe my brother wanted to adopt one of our sons because he was thinking about his inheritance. I wish I could have made a decision about the adoption when my brother brought it up, but it was too late after he left that day. I casually mentioned the idea of adoption to my two sons. Surprisingly, my second son said he would be happy to be adopted. Unlike my oldest son, my second son doesn't have any specific goals right now. He seemed to think that being adopted by my brother would give him an easy life. I expected my eldest son, who looks up to my brother, to want to be adopted too, but his answer surprised me. He said, "I don't want to be adopted because as the eldest son, I will take care of you, Mom and Dad." I was overjoyed by his response, but I also knew that my eldest son, who wanted to be a lawyer, would be the best fit for adoption by my brother. I felt disappointed that I couldn't finalize the adoption for my unconscious brother. I didn't want my brother's inheritance, but the thought of his property going to my sister-in-law, who seemed to be eagerly awaiting his death, was unbearable. I could only hope for my brother's recovery, but he never regained consciousness. A few days later, he passed away. With no other choice, I had to contact my sister-in-law. When I informed her of my brother's passing and asked about arranging the funeral, she responded with disturbing cheerfulness. "Everything is up to you," she said casually. "Just don't appoint me as a pallbearer. I don't want to deal with any formalities." Before I could even process her callousness, she quickly hung up the phone. Left with the responsibility, my husband and I planned the funeral. The staff from my brother's law firm were incredibly helpful, assisting us in various ways. My husband was concerned about the firm's future, but my brother had taken care of that as well. Although he was the representative lawyer, he had delegated the management to someone he trusted, ensuring that the firm would continue to operate smoothly. The funeral was a large affair, attended by many people, including presidents of major corporations, politicians, and others. So many wreaths were brought that they couldn't all fit in the hall. It was then that I realized just how respected and admired my brother had been. My eldest son, who had been assisting at the funeral, handled everything with maturity. However, my second son was visibly frustrated when he saw the prominent figures in attendance. "I knew I should have been adopted," he lamented, realizing the significance of the opportunity he might have had. My husband and I both felt a twinge of understanding for his sorrow, though the decision had been out of our hands. I served as a pallbearer, and surprisingly, no one questioned the absence of my sister-in-law. It was as if no one even knew she existed. My brother and his wife hadn't had a wedding. They had only gone on a honeymoon, so it was possible that even some of the relatives were unaware of their marriage. If this was how things were going to unfold, I wondered if anyone would have noticed had they never married at all. I almost wished they had never married. What's the point of having a wife who doesn't even attend her husband's funeral? I also regretted not letting my brother adopt my second son sooner, because now it seemed like his wife would take all of my brother's estate. With the help of the law firm staff, my brother's funeral was finally over. I invited everyone to my brother's house for a meal to thank them for their support. I told them that my brother could rest in peace because of their help. We were all feeling very sad. That's when my sister-in-law showed up, wearing a flashy pink coat. It seemed like she had timed her arrival for when the funeral was just wrapping up. I confronted her, asking, Why are you here now? She smiled widely and spoke loudly so everyone could hear. My husband's estate of $80 million, as well as this house, will be passed down to me, his wife. Since we don't have any children, everything is mine. For some reason, my brother's colleagues started laughing. We all looked at them, confused about why they were laughing. My sister-in-law glared at them and shouted, "What's so funny? You're being rude." One of the lawyers smirked and replied, "We know that you're officially divorced. We all knew the result of your divorce settlement the day before he collapsed." When I heard this, I was shocked and exclaimed, "What? You were divorced?" I looked over at my sister-in-law and she was staring at them with a furious expression. She clenched her teeth as another lawyer spoke up. "I also heard that you were ordered to pay alimony because your affair caused the divorce. That's the law." My sister-in-law yelled back, "I don't have to pay alimony, do I? I don't have anyone to pay now." She spoke mockingly, but the lawyer quickly corrected her. "The right to alimony will be passed on to Emma since she's the inheritor." It was then that I realized I was my brother's sole heir. Since their divorce was finalized and our parents are gone, I'm the only one left. My sister-in-law seemed to realize this too and looked at me with a horrified expression, causing me to take a step back. But she wasn't convinced and started yelling again. "Don't I get half of the estate now that the divorce is settled?" A lawyer, looking frustrated, replied, "Didn't Oliver give you money when the divorce was finalized? I have a receipt as proof." He had bought a house before they got married, so it wasn't part of the property they had to divide. I enjoyed watching the lawyers put her in her place, no matter what she tried to say. Then she seemed to remember something and with a slight laugh said, "There's still the life insurance. I should be the beneficiary." I was surprised by her confidence, especially when everyone around her was clearly against her. She claimed she had changed the beneficiary on Oliver's life insurance to herself. But the lawyer quickly shut her down, saying Oliver was a careful man, so he probably changed the beneficiary when the divorce was finalized. I searched through my brother's belongings and found the life insurance policy. My sister-in-law snatched it from me and anxiously checked the beneficiary. When she realized it wasn't her, she returned it to me, visibly disappointed. I looked at the policy and saw that I was the beneficiary. Realizing she was getting nowhere, my sister-in-law finally blurted out her true feelings. "I married a lawyer because I thought he was rich, but now I'm stuck with little money and alimony to pay. This is a huge mistake." One of the lawyers grimly replied, "Oliver said the same thing. He regretted ever seeking advice from a marriage counselor and felt he made a big mistake." My brother never mentioned anything like this to me, but he was always honest with his colleagues and subordinates. With nothing left to argue, my sister-in-law stormed out of my brother's house. Later, she had to start paying alimony in installments, but since she didn't have a job, she quickly started looking for one. However, she had never taken work seriously before and quit almost immediately. Desperate for money, she rejoined the marriage counseling agency to find a wealthy man. She found one and tried to cheat him out of his money, but he quickly caught on and reported her to the police. She was arrested for marriage fraud. A lawyer from my brother's law firm told me this. To be honest, she never paid me any alimony. When I went to see the lawyer about it, this story came up. He told me that now that she's been arrested, it's unlikely I'll ever receive any alimony payments. But I wasn't really interested in the money. I just wanted to see her face the consequences of her actions. I think my brother would have wanted the same. I asked the police to thoroughly investigate her other crimes and make sure she's charged in court. My family moved into the house my brother left behind. My husband and sons were thrilled to live in such a big house after living in an apartment. My eldest son started studying law harder than ever. Watching my brother's colleagues and subordinates argue with my sister-in-law made him want to become a lawyer too. Even though he wasn't adopted by my brother, I hope he will carry on his legacy and become a great lawyer, just like him. My second son, however, was upset and disappointed that I inherited my brother's entire estate. He joked, "Honestly, I wish I had been adopted by uncle so I could have inherited everything." He said it with a half smile, but I knew he was a little serious.